The Septuagint was the first translation of Bible portions ever accomplished. The Greek king of Egypt, Ptolemy II, asked 72 Jewish scholars to translate the Torah from Hebrew into Greek. These scholars completed the translation in Alexandria in 260 BC, and their work was published at the famous Ancient Library of Alexandria. The second language into which portions of the Bible were translated was Palestinian Aramaic. When the Jews returned from the Babylonian exile around the year 532 BC, they spoke Aramaic, the official language of the Babylonian Empire, not their ancestral Hebrew language. They needed an interpretation when they listened to the Hebrew Bible. This translation into Aramaic is called Targum. It was initially oral and then written down later, probably starting around the year 120 BC. It was the language that Jesus spoke. Before the Torah was translated into any additional language, the biblical canon was expanded to include the books of the New Testament. These books cover the story of the birth of Jesus Christ. His life and work on earth, his death on the cross, his resurrection, the story of the first churches, and the book of Revelation, which is the book about the end of the world. The third language in which portions of the Bible were translated was Old Syriac. This language is related to Palestinian Aramaic, but was unintelligible to Palestinian Aramaic speakers. Old Syriac was spoken in Edessa and Antioch at the border of southeast Turkey and Syria. Unknown translators completed portions of both the Old and New Testament by the year 110 AD. The Syriac Bible, called the Peshitta, became the standard version used by the Syrian Orthodox Church in the 5th century. The Peshitta formed the basis for all translation into languages spoken along the ancient Silk Road. In the ancient world, there were three main trade routes along which people moved: the Cappadocian Road, the Silk Road, and the Trans-Saharan Road. On the Cappadocian trade route, missionaries reached the Goths, who lived in the area of modern-day Bulgaria and Ukraine on the shores of the Black Sea. Gothic was an Eastern Germanic language related to English. The conversion of the Goths is generally attributed to Wulfila, who was consecrated as bishop of the Goths in the year 342 AD. Wulfila created the Gothic alphabet and translated the whole Bible around the year 350. The Goths played an important role in the fall of the Roman Empire. Their civilization peaked around 400, went into decline, and became extinct before the 9th century. The fifth language into which portions of the Bible were translated was the Sogdian language spoken in Samarkand, an important station on the Silk Road in modern-day Uzbekistan. Sogdian is an Indo-European language into which missionaries translated the book of Psalms and the Gospels of Matthew, Luke, and John. The translators used the Sogdian alphabet, which is a descendant of the Aramaic script and the parent of the Uyghur and Mongolian scripts. The Sogdians were driven away from Samarkand by Uzbek and Tajik tribes in the 16th century, but have survived as a small tribe in Uzbekistan today. The sixth language was Coptic, found along the Trans-Saharan Road in Egypt. Egyptian Christians believe that the Coptic Church was founded by Mark the Evangelist in the 1st century. As the Hellenistic culture enjoyed prestige, the Egyptians adapted and expanded the Greek alphabet for writing the Coptic language and translated the Septuagint and the Greek New Testament into Coptic. The exact translators are unknown, but the earliest manuscripts can be traced back to the year 400. The seventh language to receive a translation of scriptures was Latin. The Bishop of Rome commissioned the Church Father Jerome to translate the Bible into Latin. Jerome spent considerable time in Bethlehem to access the original Hebrew text. A statue at the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem commemorates his stay. He accomplished the task in 405 AD and his translation, the Vulgate, was the authoritative Bible in Europe for more than 1,000 years. The eighth language was Armenian, which was used in the Caucasus region. Gregory the Illuminator converted the Armenians to the Christian faith as early as the year 301. About 100 years later, the language expert Mesrab Mashtots created the Armenian alphabet and translated the Bible into Old Armenian around the year 411. Language number 9 was Old Georgian, a neighbor of Old Armenian. Unknown translators created the Georgian alphabet and translated portions of the Bible in the year 480. Language number 10 was Ge'ez, or Ethiopian. The Syrian missionary Frumentius converted the Ethiopian king of Aksum to the Christian faith in 383. 100 years later, in 480, a group of Syrian missionaries translated the Bible into Ge'ez. Ge'ez became the liturgical language of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church after the 10th century. Language number 11 was Middle Persian, or Pahlavi, the descendant language of Old Persian. Old Persian was the language spoken by Queen Esther when, according to the Old Testament, the festival of Purim was introduced after the Jewish people escaped the evil schemes of the Persian official Haman. Around the year 550, portions of the Old Testament, including the Book of Esther, were translated into Middle Persian, possibly by Jewish residents of Persia. In the 20th century, archaeologists found Middle Persian Bible fragments on the Silk Road in the Nestorian monastery at Turfan in China. Language number 12 was Arabic. Although portions of the Bible were orally translated into Arabic before the rise of Islam, it is only in the year 631 that John II, the Patriarch of the Syrian Orthodox Church in Antioch, translated the Gospels into Arabic. Middle Chinese, the official language of the Tang Dynasty, was language number 13. Syrian missionaries traveled on the Silk Road as far as the city of Chang'an, today's Xi'an, around the year 635. In the 17th century, a stela was excavated in Xi'an and is now held at the Xi'an Beiling Museum. The Chinese text on the stela mentions the arrival of Syrian missionaries in 635 and the translation of Bible portions, none of which have survived. The next three languages were located in Europe. Language number 14 was Old High German. The English missionary St. Boniface felled the Donar oak in Fritzlar in Germany around the year 723. Seeing that the god Donar did not punish him for this, many German tribesmen converted to the Christian faith. In the year 810, monks at the Mondsee Monastery in Austria translated the Gospel of Matthew into Old High German. Language number 15 was Old English. The Roman monk Augustine converted the English king Ethelbert in 597 and built a Benedictine monastery in Canterbury. After the Christian faith was firmly grounded in England, monks at the monastery of St. Augustine translated the Book of Psalms and possibly other portions of the Bible into Old English in 850. Language number 16 was Old Church Slavonic, a language that is now extinct and was related to Bulgarian and Macedonian. The two brothers Cyril and Methodius from Thessaloniki in Greece, who settled in what is now the Czech Republic, created the Cyrillic alphabet and translated the Book of Psalms in 863 and the whole Bible in 884. Church Slavonic is still used as the liturgical language in many Slavic Orthodox churches today. Between the years 900 and 1200, translation projects appear to have been mostly frozen without any known output of scriptures. Three factors explain this inactivity. Firstly, Europe was linguistically fragmented with hundreds of vernacular languages that had proliferated after the fall of the Roman Empire. Most languages did not exhibit a single obvious variety upon which a translation could be based. Secondly, the popes developed a negative attitude toward translating the Vulgate, the Latin Bible, into the vernacular languages of Europe. This culminated in prohibitions at the councils of Toulouse in 1229 and Tarragona in 1234 against reading and translating the Scriptures. Thirdly, the intellectual climate at the turn of the first millennium was not conducive to major endeavors such as Bible translation. The information monopoly of the Catholic Church, the corruption of the popes, and as some have argued, apocalyptic expectations related to the year 1000 held intellectual activity in bondage. In the age of scholasticism, critical thinking was gradually reintroduced, but this did not substantially increase the number of scripture translations, at least not between 1200 and 1400. For 6 out of 9 new languages during this period, local authorities or kings sponsored the translation, whereas for 3 languages, the establishment repressed the translators. Peter Waldo and his disciples, the Poor of Lyon, commonly known as the pre-Reformation movement of the Waldensians, were excommunicated and persecuted by the Catholic Church. They translated the New Testament into Waldensian Vaudois, a dialect of Old Occitan, around the year 1190. By contrast, the kings of Norway enthusiastically supported the Stjorn translation of the Old Testament into Old Norse, completed around the year 1205. Most of the translation was done at their court. The Cathars, another Christian movement that was violently suppressed by the Catholic Church, translated the New Testament into the major dialect of Old Occitan around the year 1250. Another important translation was the Alfonso Bible in Old Spanish, so called because it was commissioned by King Alfonso the Wise of Castile. The School of Translators in Toledo completed this translation in 1280. The Bible Historiale was translated by Guillart de Moulin into Old French in 1297. In the 13th century, the Mongolians established an empire covering a vast area, including China and the Eurasian continent up to Eastern Europe. Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, requested the Pope to send missionaries to his Chinese Khanate. Pope Nicholas IV sent his envoy John of Montecorvino to the Mongol court in China. By 1307, John had translated the New Testament into Old Uyghur, which was the lingua franca of the Mongolian elite at the time. Scribes of the city of Augsburg in southern Germany translated the New Testament into Middle High German in 1350. One copy is still displayed at the municipal library in Augsburg. In 1360, the monk Peter Nagel translated the Vulgate Bible into Middle Dutch at the Carthusian Monastery in the municipality of Herne in Belgium. His translation is known as the Herne Bible and became the basis of later Dutch translations. John Wycliffe, the pre-reformer and master of Balliol College at Oxford University, had translated the Bible into Middle English with his associates by 1384. Wycliffe and his Lollard followers, who were itinerant lay preachers, were persecuted by the ecclesiastic authorities, partly for their insistence on vernacular Bible translations. such translations represented a challenge to the information monopoly of the Catholic Church. Two pivotal events made an impact on the history of Bible translation: the invention of the printing press by Johann Gutenberg in 1455, and the discovery of the New World in America by Christopher Columbus in 1492. The emergence of the printing press undermined the information monopoly of the Catholic Church in two ways. Firstly, it enabled Martin Luther and other reformers to disseminate their views by bypassing the censorship of the Catholic Church. Secondly, the printing press signaled a move away from Latin towards vernacular languages. Although the first printed book was the Vulgate, a stream of printed Bibles in 25 European and 5 Asian languages followed suit in the 15th and 16th centuries. These vernacular Bible translations initiated different processes of language standardization driven by the printing press. Since Latin was only available to a minority of intellectuals, printers, and booksellers actively created a market for books in vernacular languages by shaping standard language varieties that would be comprehensible to a wide readership. In England, the printer William Caxton played a pivotal role in the standardization of English. In Germany, Lucas Cranach the Elder played a similar role in the standardization of High German. Some historians call the commercial interest of printers the logic of print capitalism, which dictated that more books should be printed in the speech of ordinary people. The discovery of the New World by Christopher Columbus in 1492 inaugurated a period of exploration, conquest, and colonization that led to the rise of global trade. A cascade of European colonial empires were established worldwide. This put an end to European isolation by Islamic polities, which had dominated strategic parts in Europe, Africa, and Asia for centuries. Yet it took over 300 years before the end of European isolation led to a substantial increase in translated Bibles. Between 1500 and 1814, scriptures were translated into 64 new languages, 7 languages on the American continent, 34 European languages, and 23 Asian languages, but no African languages. Among the European languages, there were 2 languages spoken by Jewish communities, Yiddish and Ladino. Yiddish is the language spoken by the Ashkenazi Jews who came from the Middle East and settled into Central Europe in the Middle Ages. It is derived from Middle and High German. Rabbis translated the Torah into Yiddish in 1544. Ladino is the language of the Sephardi Jews who came from the Middle East to settle in Spain and Portugal about 2,000 years ago. The Sephardi Jews were persecuted and were finally expelled from Portugal and Spain in 1492. They immigrated to the Ottoman Empire and northern Africa. The Ladino language is derived from Old Spanish, and the Ladino Torah was translated at the School of Translators in Toledo in Spain by the year 1547. The low growth in the number of languages with scriptures following the discovery of the New World was due to the fact that the early explorations were made by Catholic nations that operated under the information monopoly of the Catholic Church. In response to the challenges of the Reformation, the Council of Trent made the Vulgate the official Catholic Bible in 1563, but remained neutral on the issue of vernacular translations. Pope Gregory XV founded the Sacred Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith in 1622 with the aim of bringing all Catholic missionaries under one unified administration. In 1655, the Sacred Congregation prohibited, by decree, the publication of books by missionaries without prior permission. This decree made Bible versions in vernacular languages almost impossible. Requests made by Catholic missionaries to publish vernacular translations were routinely turned down, which resulted in a number of aborted projects and unpublished Bible versions. This began to gradually change when Protestant nations such as the Netherlands and England started to build their own colonial empires. The Dutch established colonies in Southeast Asia, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Indonesia. The first language of Southeast Asia with a partial Bible translation was Malay, an important vehicular language spoken in Malaysia and Indonesia. Albert Cornelis Roel translated the Gospel of Matthew into Malay in 1629. As an agent of the Dutch East India Company, he was trained to work among indigenous populations. The Gospel of Matthew was published in a Malay-Dutch Diglot version by the Dutch East India Company in the Netherlands. The New Testament followed suit in 1668. In the wake of the Pilgrim Fathers sailing to the New World in 1620, the British established the 13 colonies that later morphed into the United States of America. The first language in the New World with translated Bible portions was Wampanoag, an Algonquin language spoken in the coastal regions of Massachusetts and New Hampshire. John Eliot, an English Puritan missionary, learnt Wampanoag, created a Romanized alphabet, and translated the whole Bible into Wampanoag before 1663. 1,000 copies were printed, the first Bible printed on American soil. John Eliot instituted a kind of theocracy among the hundreds of converted Indians, modeled on Moses' government of the Israelites in the wilderness, as in the book of Exodus, chapter 18. The Dutch also established Taiwan as a colony for a short period of time. First Bible portion translated in an Aboriginal language of Taiwan was in 1661. Daniel Gravius, who was a Dutch clergyman, worked in Taiwan around the year 1650. He settled in an indigenous village of the Siraya people and translated their language in a Romanized script. He translated the Gospel of Matthew into Siraya in 1661. The Gospel was published as a Siraya Dutch Diglot version in Amsterdam in 1662. During the Qing or Manchu dynasty, the number of Siraya speakers declined, and in the late 19th century, the language became extinct. The Danish were also an important colonial power and colonized the sparsely populated area of Greenland. The Danish Lutheran missionary Hans Egede went to Greenland in 1721, founded the capital Godthab, now known as Nuuk, and learned the Inuit language. Hans Egede and his son Paul completed the translation of the Gospels in 1744 and the New Testament in 1766. A smallpox outbreak complicated their missionary efforts, decimating large numbers of indigenous people. Yet as their ministry was sustained over 2 to 3 generations, it finally bore fruit, and many Inuit churches were established. The English shoemaker and missionary William Carey is regarded as the father of modern missionary societies. He founded the Baptist Missionary Society in 1792, the first modern missionary society. He left England and settled in Calcutta in 1793. He then relocated to Serampore in the Danish district by the year 1800. There, together with other missionaries, he established a printing press. Over a period of 30 years, they printed Bible portions translated into more than 30 Indian languages. The first of these languages was Bengali, followed by Urdu, Hindu, Marathi, Sanskrit, Gujarati, Odia, and even classical Chinese. These accomplishments came at great personal cost for William Carey, as his first wife Dorothy had a nervous breakdown and her mental health remained fragile until her death in 1807. The Serampore Mission Press was also associated with some of the South Indian languages close to the city of North Paravur, where the Apostle St. Thomas had reportedly evangelized local populations in the year 52. These languages were Malayalam, Telugu, and Kannada.